the amount of unknowns that I had on the table, I joked with my CEO at the time that we needed a bigger table.
Welcome to Boardroom Confidential, a podcast by Sherpany where business leaders tell the stories they usually only share with their peers. Each episode, we have 3 items on the agenda: pressure, lessons, and boardroom dynamics. I'm Emily Sheffield, journalist, broadcaster, former newspaper editor and board member, and I'm looking forward to sitting down with senior leaders to talk about what really goes on behind the boardroom doors when the pressure's on and the stakes are high. Joining me this week is Mark Williams. Mark is the Chief Revenue Officer at Datasite Group. Datasite provides secure software solutions for managing the full spectrum of financial transactions, including mergers and acquisitions, restructuring and administration, and capital raising. They support advisors and their clients across the entire deal lifecycle with solutions that shorten timelines for buy-side and sell-side teams from deal sourcing and deal preparation through to post-merger integration. Mark has years of experience as a cross-industry senior sales leader with much of his career spent in financial services. Unlike our previous guests, Mark doesn't sit on a board, but his experiences in the boardroom have often come at the most crucial times for a business, in the build-up to or during an acquisition. Welcome to the podcast, Mark.
Thank you very much, Emily. It's a pleasure to be here.
Datasite provides software that acts as a data room during an acquisition, and I wonder if we could talk a bit about how data rooms have changed over the past decade or so.
I would categorize it in that there have been a couple of cycles in the market. The first cycle was when that analog world was digitized. And when that happened, the fact that you didn't have to take a deal team to a particular city in order to conduct diligence, the data room played a vital role. The fact that as a seller using a data room, you now were no longer constrained by physical access to the data room. You can invite more parties in. That elasticity created more competition for assets, created better outcomes for sellers. And we saw, the adoption of data rooms accelerate and hockey stick. After a while, that value proposition wasn't enough. And I think that's when we entered the second phase of data rooms, where workflow tools that would help people proactively complete work, tools that would proactively highlight risk, capabilities in terms of security and access, reporting and instrumentation. That was really the second phase, and I think as we are in a fairly mature part of that cycle, the next phase is agentic AI and how those new capabilities that are just coming to the fore now and are just being understood, I think how they affect data rooms is going to be very interesting and quite exciting over the next few years. And it's one of the reasons why Datasite acquired Blue Flame.
The first item on our agenda is boardroom pressure. When you were 28, you were the sales manager for financial services at a vast software company, and you were required to report to the board at a critical moment for the company. Can you set the scene for us?
Yes. So a large public company, the enterprise software deals that we were doing were very large, quite often in partnership with large systems integrators like IBM. And we were not doing a lot of deals, relatively speaking, on a quarterly basis. So a deal happening or not happening would materially impact our results for that quarter. And obviously, as a public company, we were setting expectations with the markets, our investors, the analyst community, and things like that. So being in that environment and being asked to give a view was, I would say, yes, a high pressure situation.
And you say it was a high pressure situation going into that board meeting. How had you prepared?
The preparation was extensive. You don't always know what question you're going to get answered. So you may get 4 or 5 questions, but you need to be prepared to answer over 100 questions. I think the second level of preparation is understanding the intent behind the question, so that you can interpret how your answer will be received. And certainly, I was taught very by some senior people that less is more, and answer the question that you are asked, while understanding the intent, but not to provide more than what has been asked for.
And when you were in that room, what support did you have from others, either around the boardroom table or from your CEO?
Well, prior to the board meeting, we had certainly had prep sessions. Who was going to answer what topics, if a question came up regarding a particular deal, who would answer that. Obviously, I was on point to answer that question, but we had game planned if a particular question was answered and I gave the first response, how my CEO or CFO would back up my answer. So as the board, who were just getting that snapshot each quarter at the board meeting, could understand as fully as possible the situation we were dealing with.
Mark, you were just 28 going into this sort of very important board meeting, and we've talked a lot about sort of different types of imposter syndrome. Did you have any feelings of imposter syndrome, and what was your answer to overcome those? Was it just sort of, prep, more prep, and more prep?
Yes, I certainly had imposter syndrome. I thought extensively about the level of preparation and that I'd done. I knew I had the support of my CEO and CFO. They would not be putting me in the room if they didn't feel comfortable with me being in that situation. And I think there's a moment though, and all of those feelings are natural, but there's a moment once the board meeting starts where if you are looking to be, successful, you want that pressure. You want to be in those meetings. And that's something where you feel a sense of achievement that you're actually there. And that was certainly how I felt.
Let's move on to boardroom lessons. I wonder how the experience we just spoke about helped you with future board meetings and preparing for future big sort of experiences like that.
Well, certainly there was a review afterwards where I got asked some of my mentors from that board meeting about my performance, about my preparation, about the full life cycle of how we'd got to that board meeting and the outcomes that we were going to then try and achieve that came out of the board meeting as action items. But also it gave me an opportunity to ask about other people's performance in the boardroom and ask questions about, this person said this, why did that happen? This person responded in this way, why did that happen? And I think that was, for me, as useful as getting feedback on my own performance. I very specifically remember one situation where a question was asked of somebody in the room and it should have been a fairly rudimentary yes/no answer. And they gave a rather verbose monologue, which led to 4 or 5 other questions that hadn't really been prepped for. And that was definitely highlighted as an example for me of what not to do.
I think you referred to that as your one build rule. Would you, and this was an advice given to you by a CEO and at the time, to tell me about the one build rule.
So during the extensive preparation that we were doing, and obviously this was my first time going through it, my CEO at the time explained the one build rule to me. So you have somebody who's the designated point person for the question. And when they answer it, if there is more detail or an additional point of view that somebody feels the board will benefit from understanding, that person can call an audible and add to the answer that was provided. But only one person gets to do that. That is the one build. And that forces a degree of, you have to be very confident that what you are going to build on the answer with is going to add value. And if you're not sure, you shouldn't say anything. And it also means that if somebody does build once, that somebody else doesn't try and build a second or a third time, that ultimately takes the board further and further away from the original question that was asked. And ultimately that leads to confusion. And ultimately in a board meeting, you want a hyper sense of clarity when answering questions.
Let's talk about preparation in the boardroom. Often I've seen people afraid to ask for clarification on a question they've been asked, and it's led to all sorts of issues. Is that something you've come across? Can you give an example of that?
I think one of the things that's important while you are preparing answers for a board meeting, given that you talk about your company on a daily basis, you can quite often use jargon or acronyms that you're very comfortable with and understand the context of. And board members may not, because they are not in the business on a daily basis. So one of the areas that preparation can really help with in terms of providing clarity for a board member you're answering a question for is to make sure that you are not using jargon and acronyms or things that, you know, will not be fully understood by somebody who's not in the business on a daily basis. And I certainly found that helpful in my prep sessions.
I think it's an extremely good point to make about the acronyms. They can come thick and fast from people reporting to boards as well. So finally, agenda item number 3, boardroom dynamics. We've gone over this before, but before you go into a board meeting, how much preparation do you do to know the people you're going to speak to? And how important do you think that is?
I think understanding the people on the board is very important. It gives you an opportunity to assess and interpret where their questions may be coming from. Is somebody on the audit committee? Does somebody have a finance background? Does somebody, an independent director, have they maybe been a CEO before and they're taking a holistic view of the business? So understanding where somebody's questions may be coming from, one, helps you prepare, but 2, also helps you prepare any clarifying questions that you may ask before actually answering the question.
And can I ask, what you're outlining here are very sort of human skills. We're entering an age of AI, but in a way, conversely, AI is going to make human skills more important, and those human meetings and relationships more vital. It's going to make you stand out. So why has it been so important to you to do that level of research? How's that paid off in those meetings that you've had with people?
I think AI enhances human connection. It gives me the ability to consume more information in a shorter space of time. That gives me a better picture of the person that I'm dealing with, how I'm going to connect with them, how I'm going to build rapport with them, how I make sure the answers to the questions I provide land and give them what they need with a sense of confidence that they've asked a question that they want the answer to and that they feel I've answered it fully with a high degree of accuracy and that they are now comfortable to move on to the next subject in the agenda or the next subject that they want an answer to.
I've so enjoyed your insights, Mark, and I'm sure our audience have, but we always finish with a few final questions. If you could go back to your first board meeting, I think you were just 23, what would you now tell yourself?
The first board meeting I was ever in, I was 23. Prime Response were buying a competitor called Mind from a public listed company in the UK called Admiral. I had been tasked with doing the due diligence, which was in a physical data room. I did not have the benefit of a virtual data room at that point. So being at a company like Datasite is very personal for me because I know how that feels to have to try and do that work in an analog environment. I was briefing the board on the risks associated with the acquisition. And yeah, that was a pretty nervous environment for me to be in, because there were so many unknowns. And in any situation, I'm always trying to take as many unknowns off the table as possible. And the amount of unknowns that I had on the table, I joked with my CEO at the time that we needed a bigger table.
Now, Datasite acquired Sherpany in 2024. You've described that as a full circle moment relating to your early boardroom experience at Prime Response. So how much has board meeting preparation changed since your first meeting?
I think it's changed quite a lot. I think, as you have seen over the last few years, the level of accountability for boards go up. The fiduciary responsibility that board members have increase, or certainly be dialed up. I think as a board member, it's become imperative that you are as informed as possible, as early as possible, about the major factors impacting the business, both externally and internally, so that you can provide feedback and guidance to the CEO and the senior leadership team of the company you sit on the board of. And I think that originally started off in a paper format, and companies like Sherpany have digitized that experience, but then taken it to the next level with workflows and insight and information and controls that have helped board meetings and senior leadership meetings be more effective and more accountable.
And what's the potential in this area for AI in 2026 and beyond? You talk about agentic AI, it's lots of different use cases at the moment of agentic AI, but it's still something that's sort of posited in the future. Where's the potential going in 2026 and beyond?
I think the potential is vast, and I think anybody that would tell you they fully appreciate how agentic AI is going to play a role would be maybe misunderstanding how much they understand. I think it's unknown what the potential is. I think that's what makes it exciting. I think some of the capabilities that will be imagined over the next couple of years are going to come from some unfamiliar sources, and people using the technology in ways that folks who are currently in the industry, in the market, at companies like Datasite haven't considered yet. And that's one of the reasons why I'm bullish on the value that we can provide to companies over the next couple of years going forward with that capability. Ultimately, that capability is all underpinned by the data that you have access to. And I think as much as the technology advancing, we're going to see policy advance equally as fast, so that people understand the constraints that they have, the responsibilities that they have. Might not always keep pace neck and neck. Sometimes there might be a little catch up on both sides. But I think those data privacy, AI policies will be forced to acknowledge some of the capabilities that as yet are undelivered, unimagined. And I think that is going to unlock a lot of value for people.
And how, we often talk about sort of human in the loop around AI with Datasite. How do you see those? How do you see Datasite sort of helping and supporting the humans in the loop around AI development?
I think as we at Datasite think about AI, the various instantiations of AI like agentic AI, we've had AI capability in the product for a number of years now. Started off with trying to make simple tasks easier. So you upload a lot of content into the data room, Datasite interpreting that data and telling you, hey, this is a cash flow statement, this is a customer contract, this is an employment agreement. That reduction in busy work that a human had to do because maybe the the title of the document wasn't in business English. It was some kind of naming convention. So somebody had to double click, open the document, understand what it was. We're removing that type of busy work, and we're always looking for opportunities to do that in any workflow that we support. So we've seen some very early benefits from that type of work that ultimately enable people to get to the deal structure and talking about the specifics of the deal quicker. I think as we look at agentic AI, we have a similar philosophy of how can we make people better? How can we put them in positions to make better decisions, more informed decisions, and focus on the deal rather than on the busy work? And I think that's where the amount of value that AI can unlock is as yet unknown.
It's freeing people up to make better decisions, essentially, not sort of spend too much time doing what technology can do for them.
Exactly.
Mark Williams, thank you so much for sharing your boardroom stories with us and giving us your time and commitment. You've been listening to Boardroom Confidential, a podcast by Sherpany. Sherpany is a leading meeting management solution designed to meet the unique needs of the board committee, and executive meetings. Find out more at sherpany.com and make sure you subscribe to the Boardroom Confidential podcast to hear more business leaders tell the stories they usually only share with their peers.